Live from Washington, D.C., this is Balance of Power with Joe Mathieu and Kailey Leinz.
No news from Iran appears to be good news for Wall Street. Welcome to the Tuesday edition as markets move higher, even as the Strait of Hormuz remains closed and the White House tries to keep Israel from derailing a peace deal in the Middle East. I'm Joe Mathieu alongside Kailey Leinz in Washington. Kailey, it was last Friday the president said he was about to make a final determination on this, and it hasn't happened yet.
Yes, no determination has been made, and while the president continually sounds optimistic on the prospects for a deal with Iran, Iran obviously has suggested otherwise, at least publicly. And as we consider different public messages, we obviously had very different readouts of the phone call that took place between President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu yesterday in terms of the targeting of Hezbollah in Lebanon, and now we understand that that was a profanity-laced phone call. That's for sure. Multiple sources seem to be telling the same story on that. They must have been able to hear it in the hallway. Either way, you're right. Israel is continuing to pursue its interests in Lebanon based on the readout that we saw from the Prime Minister's office. There's been no response from Iran since the president truthed about that phone call. So not much has changed between this time yesterday and now, yet the markets are still carving out new record highs. Yeah, it's incredible to see the resilience of U.S. equity benchmarks in particular. On the note of no response yet from Iran, the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, he's going to be testifying 4 times on Capitol Hill this week. In his first hearing this morning, he suggested that there still is a communication issue with Iran, that in some cases it could take 6 days for them to hear back. Whether or not that's to blame for the fact that we do not have a deal yet, perhaps it's part of it, if not the whole story. Well, it helps to build out a really busy news day around here. We've got a new artificial intelligence EO that the White House dropped without warning today, and it's also primary day. 6 states going to the polls, so happy election day, Kailey Leinz. And if that wasn't enough, the president also named Bill Pulte, who of course is leading Fannie and Freddie right now, as the new acting director of national intelligence. So it's a lot on a Tuesday. It's a lot that we'll be covering for you this hour. But we begin, as always, with a check on the markets first. And for that, we turn to Charlie Pellet up in New York. Hey, Charlie.
Hi. Thank you very much, Kailey. Indeed, right now we do have the VIX trading below 16. The SOX keeps on going, up another 4.9%. That, of course, the Philadelphia Stock Exchange's Semiconductor Stock Index. Stocks are higher, and so is oil. Again, bears repeating on the VIX below 16. Equities at a record 76.16 right now on the S&P, up 16 points. That is a gain of 0.2%. A revival of the AI trade keeps fueling Wall Street momentum. The Dow up 156, up 0.3%. NASDAQ up 59 for the NASDAQ Composite Index. That is a gain of 0.2%. The 10-year 4.45%, with the 2-year 4.04%. The 30-year 4.96%, and gold higher, little changed, up 0.1%, $44.90 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude 93 even a barrel, up 0.9%. Barrel of Brent higher by 0.6 at 95.58. And Bitcoin, now with a $67,000 handle, Bitcoin is down by 5.5%. HPE, Hewlett Packard Enterprise shares are surging 16.3%, the most ever, after the company gave an outlook for annual sales that topped Wall Street estimates. Coming up after the close of trading, we will be hearing from Palo Alto Networks. A source tells Bloomberg U.S. officials are continuing with an agreement that bars the government from probing past tax filings from President Trump and his businesses, while a plan to set up an anti-weaponization fund is on hold. Recapping stocks higher, S&P 500 index up now by about 0.2%. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcast. And back we go to Washington. Once again, your hosts, Joe Mathieu and Kailey Leinz.
All right, Charlie Pellet, keeping us up to date on the markets as always. Thank you so much. Meantime, we'll continue to keep you up to date as to the messaging we're getting from President Trump regarding negotiations with Iran. And just on time for Balance of Power to begin the hour, President Trump has posted something new on Truth Social saying, quote, "Fake news reports that the Islamic Republic of Iran and the USA stopped speaking a few days ago are false and erroneous." He goes on to say the conversations between us have been going on continuously, including 4 days ago, 3 days ago, 2 days ago, 1 day ago, and today. Where they lead, one never knows. But as I told Iran, it's time one way or another for you to make a deal. You've been doing this for 47 years and it cannot be allowed to go on any longer. And he signs it, Joe. President Donald J. Trump.
So presumably he did write this, and it is amazing how he times this with the top of the program so often. Skylar Woodhouse is tracking all of this, Bloomberg News White House correspondent, as well as the new acting DNI that the president announced earlier today. And we want to get to Skylar for details on all of this. What do we make of this? Skylar, 4 days ago, 3 days ago, 2 days ago, 1 day ago, and today. So, well, I guess the last 4 days. This is a White House that is talking. As Marco Rubio suggested in testimony on Capitol Hill, sometimes it takes a long time to hear back because of the communications difficulties in Iran. Is that why we're still waiting today?
Yeah, Joe, look, I mean, I was working this past weekend, and what we saw from the president is he was at his golf club in Virginia, and he was often truthing about the Kennedy Center, about his ballroom, about sort of the renovations that were going on around here in Washington, with all, eyes and ears and questions, wondering if we would receive any sort of real update on Iran. I was on high alert for any potential deal, but I think, what we're seeing in sort of true Trump fashion right now is, as he goes about these deals, we often just hear about the timelines continuing to be pushed and stretched. But I do think it is raising a lot of questions on when that deal could actually come about. It was only last week that the president met with his national security team and did not come out with a deal when the expectation was that there would be a deal. So I think we'll have to see what this week brings. But yeah, no, there's still a lot of questions on what we can expect to see.
Well, and Skylar, as you referenced the president's national security team, I guess it's getting a new member, a new acting director of national intelligence in Bill Pulte. What qualifications does he have in that regard to be advising the president on matters like a war in Iran?
Yes, lots of questions being raised on this decision by the president. Definitely a pretty unconventional choice. Pulte, who does not have a national security background, has no military ties. So this is definitely one of those that is raising eyebrows as people try and digest what does this mean. And also, look, Pulte, he is very loyal to President Trump, and he is sort of someone that the president can trust right now. So I think it'll be interesting to see how he uses this role, and it also raises questions on how long will he serve in this acting position, and if we can expect to see how he plans to navigate the war in Iran.
Pretty remarkable that he's going to keep his jobs as well as director of FHA, chairman of Fannie and Freddie, while also working in this new role as acting DNI. Skylar, I have to ask you before you leave us quickly about the Anti-Weaponization Fund said to be scrapped. The Department of Justice following the guidance from the court, but a lot of Republican lawmakers are looking for something more official, if not in the form of legislation or an announcement from the White House. Do we expect to hear anything else from the president on this?
Yeah, well, it sounds like right now, going off of reporting, is that this is put on pause. I think with this administration, anything can always come back and resurface at any point in time. But it appears to be right now that it is on pause, as it was drawing a lot of criticism from not just Democrats, but also Republicans as well.
All right, Bloomberg's Skylar Woodhouse, thank you so much, as always, helping us run through the latest from the White House. And of course, that latest includes President Trump posting on Truth Social that continuous conversations are happening with Iran 4 days ago, 3 days ago, 2 days ago, 1 day ago, and today, suggesting that it's unclear where they will lead, but calling again on Iran to make a deal. Of course, he's contested for months now that Iran wants to make a deal. Let's remind ourselves.
Iran is very much intent. They want very much to make a deal. So far, they haven't gotten there. We have to have a deal that's acceptable to me.
They come to the table. They're begging to make a deal.
They want to make a deal badly, and we'll see if we get there. They think that they are getting very close to making a deal.
For more, we turn to Elisa Ewers, senior fellow for the Middle East Studies at the Council on Foreign Relations, a former Pentagon and State Department official in both the George W. Bush and Obama administrations. Elisa, welcome back to Bloomberg TV and radio. When we consider the prospects of a deal being made here. Iran is suggesting that one will not be until we see a resolution to Israel's incursion into Lebanon in the name of going after Hezbollah. How do you see that resolving, given the public rhetoric we continue to get from Bibi Netanyahu?
Well, thanks for having me back. I mean, I think what we're seeing is that despite the desire by the administration, it's becoming increasingly difficult to keep Lebanon separate from these broader Iran talks, and that Tehran has not relented in demanding that a ceasefire be across the board. And so I think the president is struggling with how to manage for that demand and not risk losing the possibility of an agreement, at least in the near term, on the Strait of Hormuz and on future negotiations on the nuclear program because of Israel's escalation in Lebanon.
Secretary Marco Rubio, we were noting, made the point in congressional testimony earlier today that sometimes it takes days to hear back from Iran because of their communications challenges. The president here is suggesting that they are talking every day. Is it possible that they're talking to different people?
I think both things can be true at the same time. I think that there is constant communication, especially through the mediators. We've seen that Pakistan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and others have been part of this process since the first day, and they've been continuing to try and keep those indirect channels open. So you add that step, that definitely prolongs the time that messages take to go back and forth. And then you consider that the leadership inside of Iran knows that the United States and Israel is very eager to find out exactly where the supreme leader and other members of the leadership are at any given moment. And so the degree of caution I think that they're taking to stay under the radar compounds this timeline. So I think there is probably talk with mediators every day, every hour even, but the back and forth directly with the Iranian players is taking some time.
Well, and as we consider the players, and to Joe's suggestion that they may be talking to different people, how do we guarantee that all different parties in Iran would abide by a deal if one could be reached? We note the resignation of the Iranian president over the weekend, suggesting that too much power has been given over to the IRGC. Is that who's really in charge here, who needs dealing with?
I mean, I think we've definitely seen since the beginning of the war and the targeting of so much of the previous regime's leadership that there has been a consolidation of power. And while I wouldn't say that it's the IRGC solely in the position of power, it has certainly gotten the upper hand on the decision-making inside of Iran. I mean, ultimately, we're seeing indications that the supreme leader, the new supreme leader, Khamenei, is in fact surrounding himself with his closest advisors and is making decisions, perhaps slowly. But that consolidation of power is most certainly in the security apparatus, including the IRGC.
Elisa, what's the point of seeking a 60-day extension to the ceasefire if we seem to be in one already indefinitely?
Well, we have been, right? I think part of the challenge is that it's a fragile one. It's been a fragile ceasefire since April. The Strait of Hormuz has not been reopened fully to commercial traffic. And so while the guns perhaps have gone mostly silent, although not entirely silent, the situation is not what you would want it to be. And so this conversation about a negotiation is really an agreement to continue to talk. It's really not dealing with the issues of the nuclear program, but it does give perhaps an opening to get the Strait of Hormuz more open than it has been, certainly with less direct threats from Iran on commercial traffic and on neighboring countries' infrastructure. We have seen that continue even during the ceasefire. We've had quite a number of attacks in Kuwait and UAE on commercial vessels, even as recently as reports today. But it has died down. What this deal would get you is the opening of the Strait of Hormuz in some form that allows the 1,000+ vessels that are still stuck there and have been stuck there since February to move out, and for some of that commerce to resume. And everything else gets kicked down the road for at least 60 days.
Well, and when we consider the prospect surround the Strait of Hormuz. Elisa, in a phone interview yesterday, President Trump suggested that just because there's no deal doesn't mean he's going to return to firing on them. He just says, okay, we'll just maintain the U.S. blockade. For how long is that a sustainable position for the United States?
Well, I think technically the United States could continue the blockade for some time in terms of the vessels that are deployed and the assets that are necessary to conduct that mission. That is sustainable, but it's at a cost. It's at a cost for supporting that operation, at a cost of what we're not doing, what the U.S. military is not doing elsewhere in the world as it continues to be focused on the United States. But I think what we're seeing here is that both sides see very little upside to returning to that kind of hot conflict. But the president isn't getting what he wants. He's not getting the capitulation he has sought from Iran, despite his coercive diplomacy, despite his aggressive statements, despite the economic pressure. And so he's continuing that pursuit, but it's not getting him the surrender that he's looking for.
Interesting. You know, there's a line in Washington that we hear a lot on Capitol Hill: time kills deals. As more weeks drag by, could we resolve into some sort of rolling ceasefire that lasts the rest of the year, that goes on for years, possibly?
Well, I think in some ways that might be the least of the bad options, right? If you do have some degree of confidence that the strait will reopen, that the hot conflict will not return, and that some degree of negotiations on the nuclear front are being pursued, that might be enough to kind of bridge the gap. I think the real question here, and I think this is what concerns partners and allies in the region and beyond, is the kind of unpredictability of the U.S.'s staying power in such a kind of prolonged and fragile situation, and whether the president will continue to kind of stay the course, even if that's not the best option. It may be the least bad of the bad options.
Well, Elisa, finally, if we can come back to Israel, as Benjamin Netanyahu considers his options, does he have the incentive right now to just go along with whatever it is President Trump wants, or do domestic considerations at home give him a whole different set of incentives and therefore options he may want to consider?
Well, the domestic situation is always at the front of mind of the Prime Minister of Israel. I think that is just even more in sharp relief when you have elections on the horizon, and those elections are planned for later this fall, September, possibly October. And so every decision he makes, I think, has to be seen, at least in part, through that domestic lens. And what we're seeing, I think, in Lebanon in terms of the escalation in recent days and everything on the ground kind of indicates that we are definitely seeing an escalation. This is more significant than anything we've seen in the last 20 years. It reflects maybe an anticipation of what we might see President Trump do in terms of exercising some leverage and restraint on Prime Minister Netanyahu. We obviously saw reports of that alleged call and then the reaction to that report of the alleged call. But I do think that this escalation reflects, anticipating a moment at which that space is going to be close and not able to pursue targeting Hezbollah in quite the same way. But I think I would end with saying that at the end of the day, we've seen that military force alone isn't working in Lebanon. It's not completely eliminating the Hezbollah threat, and that disarming Hezbollah is not something that happens overnight. But we are, I think, seeing talks resume today between Israel and Lebanon here in Washington. And it's this very thing that's going to give you a sustainable solution.
She worked in the Pentagon and the State Department under the George W. Bush and Obama administrations, now with the Council on Foreign Relations. Elisa, it's great to have you with us as part of our conversation today on Bloomberg. We'll assemble our political panel next. The president names a new acting DNI. It's not who you might think. We'll have details next here on Bloomberg.
It's 121 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. U.S. stocks trading at a record right now. Tech giants leading, equities higher. S&P 500 index above 7,600. 7610 right now, up 10 points. That is a gain of 0.1%. The market leaning into the assumption that the U.S. and Iran are on the brink of a deal. Oil, however, West Texas Intermediate crude is advancing. The Dow at a record up 132, up 0.3. NASDAQ up 25. For the NASDAQ Composite Index, a gain now of 0.1%. The SOX up 4.6%. That is the Philadelphia Stock Exchange's Semiconductor Stock Index. The 10-year, 4.45%. The 2-year, 4.04%, and the 30-year at 4.97%. All of this with a VIX just below 16. Gold at $44.88 the ounce, a little changed, up under 0.1%. West Texas Intermediate crude up 1.5%, 93.57 a barrel. Brent 96 even, up now by 1.1%. Victoria's Secret shares are surging, up now by 44.8%. The company beat earnings estimates and boosted its outlook. All of this on the first day of a brand new ticker symbol for Victoria's Secret, VSXY on the ticker. Recapping, S&P higher by 10, up there by just about 0.1%. Balance of power continues now. Back we go to Washington. Once again, your hosts, Joe Mathieu and Kailey Leinz.
All right, Charlie Pellet with the latest from New York on the markets. Thank you so much. I'm Kailey Leinz alongside Joe Mathieu here in Washington, where we got some news we weren't expecting today. Granted, that happens on a lot of days here in D.C., especially with this White House, but not sure we saw this one coming. We knew that President Trump was going to need to tap someone else to lead the office of the Director of National Intelligence, as Tulsi Gabbard is resigning this month due to her husband's cancer diagnosis, and make a decision on who will replace her. President Trump has, at least on an acting basis. The acting DNI will now be Bill Pulte. Yes, the housing Bill Pulte. He, of course, runs the FHFA right now and chairs Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. He will continue to do those things, but he also will be serving as acting director of national intelligence in the meantime. The acting capacity, of course, Joe, means that he won't necessarily be subject to the Senate confirmation process, where senators could do things like question him on his qualifications for this particular role.
Recalling that it was Donald Trump himself who made this a cabinet-level position in the first term, which is something that, of course, the Biden administration abided by. And it's not just this new job for a real estate man, for a home builder. He's going to keep the existing jobs as well. President Trump announcing this on Truth Social says during this period, he will remain director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency and chairman of Fannie Mae Freddie Mac. Congratulations, Director Pulte, signed by the president himself. What does the panel think about this? Rick and Jeanne are both back with us today, each Bloomberg Politics contributors. Rick is our Republican strategist and partner at Stonecourt Capital. Jeanne is our Democratic analyst and democracy visiting fellow at Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center. What motivates the president today, Jeanne, in making this pick, if nothing more than a loyalty play?
It's certainly not experience. This is a serious job. This is one where, you know, even in the case of Tulsi Gabbard, you had a lot of eyebrows raised that she had some limited background, but she didn't have enough experience. And yet she was put in there. Republicans and even a few Democrats looked the other way on that one. This one's going to be a little tougher. This is somebody in Bill Pulte who has proven himself to be an attack dog for the president, but has little, if any, experience in intelligence, either collection, analysis, or any other part of this job. And so even if he doesn't get confirmed, and I think there's a great questions about whether he in fact would, he could be there for up to a year in this position while he's still serving in his other position. And that raises a host of questions about what he's going to be doing there. Some people saying this sounds a little bit like the Rick Grinnell appointment in the first term. Very little experience, but a lot of attacks that Donald Trump used as part of his revenge tour then. And Bill Pulte has proven to be the Rick Grinnell of this second term.
Well, on the suggestion that he's an attack dog, Rick, we should remind our audience that he's the guy who first leveled mortgage fraud accusations against the likes of Fed Governor Lisa Cook and others. He went after, for example, Senator Adam Schiff on similar grounds, too. If he has the power of overseeing all 18 of the United States intelligence agencies, does that not enable him to further go after, frankly, anyone, not just senators or members of the Federal Reserve Board?
Yeah, I would think if you're an enemy of Donald Trump, this is not a very settling appointment. You would have to fear that if he took housing data, mortgage data, that he was overseeing as the head of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and used it to attack political enemies of the president, imagine the corpus of material that 18 spy agencies have that could supply him with similar ammunition. Look, I mean, there's no explanation as to why he would be appointed to this by the president other than the fact that he will be loyal and do the president's bidding. From best I can tell, he doesn't even have a security clearance, and that may be ultimately the resolve is that Congress is now saying, hey, the guy's got to at least go through a security clearance before you can appoint him to the head of the DNI. So it's a real head scratcher. I don't think it's very hard to figure out that this is an appointment that the president is making so that he has someone there who will do whatever he asks him to do regardless.
There are some consistent threads here, Jeanne, just to add to your point. The president has sent a couple of real estate professionals to negotiate peace in the Middle East, in Ukraine, and other places, including Africa. That, of course, would be Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff. He is now tapping a home builder and a real estate professional to run intelligence here inside the administration. Is this about going with what you know?
I think it's about one thing and one thing alone, and that is complete and utter loyalty to the president. His experience, his background, his expertise be damned. And the president is doing this at a time that we are obviously in war. We are in war with Iran. This is a key national security post, and you are putting somebody in there with little, if any, experience. His experience is an attack dog for Donald Trump, a political targeter. I've got to say, you know, when you think about it, he has had a number of dust-ups in the administration already. And some of these people have to be not so thrilled that he is going into this post. And that includes the Treasury Secretary. I mean, there was a repeated discussion about this back and forth between the two of them not that long ago, Scott Bessent, and there are others, but this is what he is seemingly has a background in, is as a political attack dog, but absolutely no experience, as far as we know, in national security. And I think this raises a question about the seriousness of this role anymore, and what does it say to our allies around the world who depend on us? If you're another country, if you're an ally, you've got to be looking at an appointment of a real estate scion like that and be saying, what is happening in the United States today as far as national security is concerned?
I also have to wonder about the timing of this, Rick. We were expecting that in fairly short order, the Senate was going to vote to approve a 3-year extension of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, specifically Section 702 of FISA. This was supposed to be the longer-term solution. We got a short-term extension just ahead of the deadline earlier this year. Could you see Bill Pulte's appointment as acting DNI as potentially throwing a wrench into actually getting FISA across the floor in both chambers?
Yeah, probably not. The Senate certainly itself has never really given that much import to the DNI. It doesn't originate any intelligence gathering. It accumulates it and briefs the president. All these other agencies are really led by folks who I think understand the intelligence business and can operate regardless of who the DNI is. Doesn't mean it's a good appointment. It just means it's unlikely to degrade the intelligence gathering capability of the United States. And so I can't imagine something as important as FISA reauthorization is going to be affected by something that most senators, I think, would agree is irrelevant to the security of our country.
Interesting. You know, we've got some issues here on Capitol Hill, Jeanne, that we really haven't had a chance to get to because of so much other news today. But the president wanted a reconciliation bill on his desk on the 1st of June. That did not happen. And as of today, we thought there might be a vote-a-rama tomorrow night. Maybe there still will be. But as of today, Republicans do not have the votes to start floor consideration of this reconciliation plan that, again, would fund ICE and Border Patrol. And a big reason is because of this anti-weaponization fund that's been knocked down by the courts. And a lot of Republican lawmakers want to have some definitive evidence that it is gone before they vote on anything else. Senator John Kennedy, Republican from Louisiana, said the reconciliation bill looks like a broken arm with the bones sticking out. Do you see the White House making a statement to put a lid on this, or will this have to be handled legislatively?
Yeah, always leave it to Senator Kennedy. He's got the most colorful quotes there. Yeah, I think Republicans and Democrats, obviously, but Republicans in this case are rightly concerned because, of course, all we have so far is a pause. And many, many Republicans and most Democrats would like to see this definitively put to rest. And the frustrating thing for Republicans has got to be, we would have moved probably beyond reconciliation 2 to reconciliation 3, which, you know, all four of us talked about just a few months ago as the tougher of the two, if it hadn't been for this attempt to stick this in, and it has really held this up. So I think they are looking for something definitive. I think they are doing that rightly so, because, of course, all we have now is a pause. And that is not particularly reassuring for Republicans. And so you hear from people like Kennedy and many others who say it's going to need to be a lot more than just a pause. We need to definitively put this to rest. And they know that Democrats are going to come with these amendments, and they're going to be forced to take votes on those. And they want to be on the right side of this thing.
Well, it's not just about the fund itself, Rick. Remember, the deal that came with the $1.8 billion fund was also that Trump and his sons were going to have immunity from IRS audits perpetually. And Bloomberg is now reporting that U.S. officials are going to continue on with that part of the plan. I just wonder if you think the Senate will allow for that, even if the fund goes away.
Yeah, there's a lot of anxiety on Capitol Hill, not just with Democrats, but with the Republicans too. Senators like Langford and Murkowski have expressed real concerns, not just about the fund, but also of this aspect of it, you know, basically getting immunity with your family and all your businesses for the rest of your lives, I guess. I mean, it's really hard to even understand what this deal looks like. Some of the cynical Republicans I've talked to said, hey, this is great, you know, immunity for taxes. We've finally gotten people not talking about the ballroom. And so I don't know if this is strategy or just dumb luck.
Well, they're still talking about the ballroom, too. All of it's going on. Rick Davis and Jeanne Zaino, Bloomberg Politics contributors in our political panel. Thank you so much for joining us. More Balance of Power is straight ahead right here on Bloomberg TV and radio.
It's 1:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. We're off session highs. NASDAQ just turning negative. S&P now little changed, up under 0.1%. Dow at a record. S&P also at a record 7604, up by 4 points right now, up under 0.1%. The Dow up 148, up 0.3. NASDAQ, as I mentioned, lower now by 11. That is a drop of under 0.1%. A revival of the AI trade keeps fueling Wall Street momentum. The VIX, just above 16 right now, have been trading below that number. The 10-year, 4.45%, with the 2-year, 4.04%, and the 30-year, 4.96%. Gold flat on the day at $44.84 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude higher, 93.57, up 1.5%. Brent crude 96.05. Barrel of Brent up now by 1.1%. Marvell Technology shares surging after NVIDIA's Jensen Huang predicted the semiconductor and networking company will be the next business to hit $1 trillion valuation. Shares of Marvell, they are up by 29.1%. 1%. NVIDIA right now down by 0.6%. Huang made the comment at the Computex trade show in Taipei alongside Marvell CEO Matt Murphy. Now, NVIDIA has something to gain in saying so. The chip giant took a $2 billion stake in Marvell 3 years ago. A source tells Bloomberg U.S. officials are continuing with an agreement that bars the government from probing past tax filings from President Trump and his businesses, while a plan to set up an anti-weaponization fund is on hold. Recapping, S&P 500 index, little changed, up 7 now, up by about 0.1%. For on-demand news 24 hours a day, subscribe to Bloomberg News Now wherever you get your podcast. I'm Charlie Pellet, Joe and Kailey. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, many thanks. Charlie, we'll have more coming up at the top of the hour as we kick off Bloomberg Business Week Daily. The AI trade not doing super great today, and well, it's been on a tear lately, and we do see NVIDIA now on the downside, down about $1 here. Most of the Mag 7 trading lower as well, unless Charlie tells me otherwise. And a lot of that has to do with this $80 billion fundraise that Alphabet announced. But it also comes on the same day that the White House very quietly dropped its AIEO, Artificial Intelligence Executive Order, an earlier version having been canceled just 2 weeks ago. Kailey, we remember that some high-tech executives, you've heard of them, Mark Zuckerberg, Elon Musk, reportedly David Sachs as well, got to the president say this could actually hamstring America's effort to win the AI race. And so he canceled that event with some executives actually in the air. No event today, but the EO is out.
Yeah. A slightly amended version that
That's
perhaps
right.
won't act as the blocker that President Trump feared it would in terms of U.S. progress in this arena versus China, which is the concern that he cited. Instead of a 90-day review period for companies to voluntarily share new models with the government before their release, that window is now a shorter 30 days, but it still remains voluntary. This EO actually explicitly says that this will not be a mandatory process, that there will be no granting of licenses here, for example. So let's get into all of this now as we turn to Michael Shepard, Bloomberg Senior Editor for Technology and Strategic Industry. So is that really the big change, is just a shorter window? This is still all voluntary. These companies are still not going to be compelled to do anything if they don't want to.
Well, that's right. And the voluntary component is key. They want to make it clear that they are not standing in the way, acting, as the president himself said 2 weeks ago, a blocker in the way of innovation in this arena. And we can see just what the financial stakes are, not only with developments, every day from the AI companies themselves, but the related investment. That capital raise that Alphabet is planning is just, the tip of the iceberg when you talk about the money going into the economy, going into hard infrastructure being built, as well as some of the soft infrastructure and software that's being rolled out to industries across the country. So the president doesn't want to be seen standing in the way of that. And yet at the same time, we do have a public that is feeling some misgivings about and concerns about what AI could mean in terms of, their jobs, but then businesses also wondering about what it means in terms of their security. And that is what this order is aimed at, cybersecurity specifically, but it does not, Kailey, mandate much in the way of teeth at all.
So if it's toothless, then is there still more to follow, either from this administration or from Congress? I mean, I realize we can barely pass a budget on Capitol Hill right now, Shep, but there was a call for guardrails, and a lot of people might not see this as being the definitive example of that.
Yeah, this certainly would not be the definitive version of guardrails, really, by any stretch of the imagination. And instead, it really is focusing on some of those emerging cyber vulnerabilities that Mythos has highlighted for us since its release back in mid-April. A moment that really shook the financial world, shook governments around, in different blocks, looking at, okay, these are the cyber vulnerabilities that we've always feared could be exposed by AI. Now it's real. But some of those fears now seem to be attenuating. For example, Anthropic today is releasing Mythos to a far wider range of organizations for their testing and use. And so some of this is becoming normalized too. So now the question is, what would the next step be? Now, guardrails from this administration on a technology it's seeking to promote, hard to imagine. And yet, Joe, you brought up Congress. Congress has been talking about this for some time.
That's right.
Not only in the security question, but there's so many other fronts that include privacy and that include the questions of job security and economic security as well. So we may still hear from lawmakers on this. Whether or not, as you say, they can get it done, of course, is the eternal open question on Capitol Hill.
Well, we know that Republicans and Democrats largely do not agree on this issue. Shep, thank you so much. Michael Shepard with us live in Washington with the breaker today, the AIEO out of the White House. And I'll tell you what, Kailey, one of the stories that we'll be pursuing toward the end of this midterm election cycle is the role that AI money spent in helping to decide elections. Maybe this is the crypto of 2026, knowing that crypto money had a major impact on races in 2024. I bring this up to say happy primary day. It's another mini Super Tuesday, and we've got 6 states in play, including California, the jungle primary, and we dare traipse into the jungle now with the help of Kyle Kondik. You know, it's campaign season when Kyle is back on with us, managing editor of Sabato's Crystal Ball at the University of Virginia's Center for Politics. Kyle, it's great to see you. I'm starting with California. We'd love to be able to get a couple of states in here, but the gubernatorial race is a big one. And we just spent some time out in LA, so I had a chance to be treated to the political ads from Javier Becerra and Tom Steyer. The question is, with these two Democrats potentially out in front, and the conventional wisdom is this is Becerra's to lose here, there's a question about whether a Republican named Steve Hilton will make his way into a likely runoff. How are you looking at the gubernatorial contest in California?
Yeah, I mean, you named the 3 contenders for the 2 slots, and you also got to remember, you know, California. It's a Hollywood cliffhanger in terms of the actual vote counting. It's going to take weeks to actually finalize it, and so you know, when we wake up tomorrow morning in the East, we probably won't really know exactly who will have advanced, because you might still have a big chunk of the vote that still remains to be counted. It is worth noting that, you know, a few months ago, when the Democratic field was much more muddled, there was some worry among Democrats that 2 Republicans might advance to the general election, despite California being a blue state in a blue-leaning year. Now it seems more likely, or at least more possible, that those 2 Democrats, Becerra and Steyer, could actually advance to the general election. Certainly, you'd favor strongly a Democrat to be the next governor of California, and it's among those 3 to determine who makes the top 2 elections in November.
I really want to ask you, Kyle, about Spencer Pratt in the LA mayoral race, but I feel like I probably should instead lean on your expertise to talk about the fact that California in the House or the congressional primaries is dealing with the new map post Prop 50. So with that in mind, which races are you watching most closely today?
The 2 shakiest intended Democratic pickups are an open seat, California 48, which has Palm Springs, and then some more kind of conservative-leaning territory. It voted for Kamala Harris by about 3 points. There's a pretty hotly contested race on the Democratic side to see who the Democrat emerges against. Jim Desmond, who's a San Diego County office holder, is the leading Republican candidate. And then David Valadao, who lost in 2018, but as a Republican incumbent, but otherwise has been a great survivor in a kind of a swing district that really swung pretty heavily toward Donald Trump in 2024, and even under the new lines voted for Trump by 2 points. And there's kind of a left versus center kind of Democratic primary to see who gets to advance to face Valadao. And again, those are 2 seats that are really important to the overall Democratic House math. You see these analyses of redistricting and say, oh, well, Democrats are, they're going to pick up 5 seats in California. Not necessarily, because they do have to win those 2 swing seats. And I'd say the same thing about how, in Texas, Republicans drew themselves 5 new seats, but they're not guaranteed to win all 5 of those seats.
Really interesting. Let's go to Iowa for a moment, Kyle, because we've got a really important Senate race there. This is one of the seats that Democrats think they can flip, the seat that's being vacated by Joni Ernst. And it's a test as well for Chuck Schumer, who has come behind Josh Turek, a moderate Democrat state lawmaker who's also a Paralympic gold medalist. And he's up against a progressive named Zach Walz. How does this shake out?
Yeah, Turek is definitely kind of the D.C. Democratic candidate against Zach Walz, who's in the context of this race is kind of more of the outsider, even though Walz is also a member of the state legislature in that state. There's been a lot of money that's come in through this third-party group called Vote Vets, which is kind of connected to Democratic leadership in sort of an indirect way. Turk himself is not a veteran, but his father was. Obviously they're coming in very strongly for Turek. Waiting for the Democratic nominee is very likely to be Ashley Hinson, who is a House member from Northeast Iowa. Hinson won a very competitive race in 2020 to get elected as Republican to the House, and I think is a relatively strong replacement nominee for Joni Ernst, who's retiring. I do think that if Turek gets nominated, I think that race gets more competitive. Although I don't necessarily think it's a true toss-up. At least to start the general election. We'll see who ends up winning the Democratic nomination.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so where right now in terms of the reaches and then potentially achievable or more likely to be achievable Senate flips for Democrats does Iowa rank right now? Kyle, you also have the likes of Alaska and Maine, in Texas. Is Iowa actually potentially the easiest of all of them?
I don't think so. I would probably rank Alaska and Ohio ahead of Iowa, at least at this point, mainly because Mary Peltola, former House member running in Alaska, and Sherrod Brown, former senator running in Ohio, are, I'd say, more proven candidates than whoever the Democrats end up nominating in Iowa. Iowa also is a little bit more Republican for president, at least than Ohio was. And then I'd put maybe Texas and Iowa in a similar kind of bucket. Bottom line is that even if Democrats win essentially all the other competitive races, so Maine and North Carolina as seats that Republican seats they're targeting, Democrats need to defend Michigan, but even if they do all that, they need at least two double-digit 2024 Trump states in order to flip the Senate. Alaska and Ohio, again, I think are probably at the top of that list, but then you look at like an Iowa and a Texas and maybe a few other places as possibilities, depending on how the candidates do and how good the environment is for Democrats. Certainly the political environment does look pretty good for Democrats right now. It kind of looks like 2018 or maybe even a touch bluer than that by the time we get to November.
I just want to mention a breaking headline that just crossed the terminal. It's a redhead, having told you a bit earlier that they are going to do another White House Correspondents' dinner at the end of July 24th. The president just posted that he does plan to attend. It's apparently going to be at the former Trump Hotel, now the Waldorf on Pennsylvania Avenue. Kailey didn't want to get into it, Kyle, but I've got to bring up Spencer Pratt because this is the talker.
I mean, wanted to.
The AI Star Wars videos alone bring us to this moment here. Is this real? Like, is he said to be in third place behind Mayor Karen Bass? Can he make the runoff?
My guess is it'll be relatively close for whether he makes it or not. And remember, whatever the results look like when you wake up in the morning in the East are not necessarily what they're going to look like finally. One of the things that seems like has happened is that because of some of the drama in the California governor's race and also arguably the LA mayor's race too, it seems like Democrats were a little bit later in terms of turning in their ballots. And so, at various times over the last 10, 15 years under California's current election system, you had this sort of like a red mirage to start, meaning that the initial results kind of looked more Republican and then they got bluer as all the votes were counted. It seems like we're probably in for that sort of dynamic again. So don't make any judgments based on what the results look like overnight. You gotta wait for the whole thing to be finished.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Kyle Kondik of the Crystal Ball. Thank you so much for joining us. The Center for Politics, of course, where the Crystal Ball lives, although it's not actually.
Have we ever seen the Crystal Ball?
I think we all wish we could have a real
keep that
physical
somewhere in the office. Larry Sabato's got it in his desk. You went there.
Crystal
I don't know.
Ball. Yeah.
University
Go
of Virginia.
Always gotta
so I guess
add that in.
I got to bring the tuxedo back to the cleaners, huh?
Yeah.
July 24th. Did I have that right?
Yes, at
That's
the
a
Waldorf,
Friday, though.
President Trump will be in attendance. He suggests it shows strength and fortitude that the White House Correspondents' dinner will be rescheduled after, of course, the shooting.
Do they still do a garden brunch on a Friday? This feels off.
It's
a day early. We'll meet you on the late edition of Balance of Power, 5 p.m. Eastern, here on Bloomberg.